Let me ask you a question. Do you remember the whole Alberta is calling campaign that was launched just around maybe a year ago? You know, the campaign that targeted primarily BC and Ontario residents to reconsider their lifestyle and ditch the big cities and head out to Alberta where things were simply more affordable. I also remember Jason Kenney, the premier at the time, claiming the home prices in Calgary and Edmonton being 1/3 of the prices in the Greater Toronto or Vancouver area. Roll the clip.
The cost of buying a home in Calgary or Edmonton is about 1/3 of the cost of buying the same home in the Greater Toronto area or the Greater Vancouver region.
Well, that certainly aged well. So the big question that I wonder is it still worth relocating to Calgary from another part of Canada today? I mean, let's face it, a lot has changed over the last year and a bit. For one, the man of the hour himself is no longer premier. And secondly, and more importantly, the home prices in Calgary are also no longer 1/3 of the prices of Toronto or Vancouver. Anyways, so today I'm going to be providing you with some updates about the city of Calgary, and together we can determine if relocating to Calgary still makes sense financially from another Canadian city. So if that sounds good with you, do me a favor, smash the like button down below, and now let's begin. Alright, let's start off with cost of living in Calgary, and I would like to think or assume that one of your primary reasons to relocate to Calgary and ditch the big city lifestyle would have to do with affordability. Like, what other reason why you would want to go there? For cowboys? And so with that, I'd imagine that you're also curious to know what the real estate prices look like in that city. So let's take a closer look. According to the Calgary Real Estate Board, it has the median price of a single detached going for $635K, a townhouse for $400K, and apartment units for $283K. And to do a side comparison with the city I'm currently living in, Toronto, you have a single detached for $1.25 million, condo townhouses for $790K, and a condo apartment for $645K. And I think the point that I'm really trying to highlight here for you guys is that it's no longer 1/3 of the price out in Toronto. It's rather 1/2 of the price in Toronto, which honestly is not a bad selling point at the end of the day. But the context that I want to give you guys is that when you're buying out in Calgary, it's a modern looking detached home. It's not some shafty old looking place that I question if I were to buy it. Shifting our attention to the rental market, on rentals.ca for their November report, we have a 1-bedroom out in Calgary going just over $1,700 per month and a 2-bedroom going for $2,150. And to give you some quick insight from my experience, 3 years ago when I moved to Calgary in 2020, my 1-bedroom at the time was going for $1,350 a month. Mind you that this was also during the middle of the pandemic when there was just a lot of rental vacancies in general in the city of Calgary. And although it has jumped up drastically over the last few years, where else in Canada did it not jump up? Next, let's talk about the career opportunities that exist out in Calgary. But first, I also want to be just transparent that this was one of the main reasons why I ultimately didn't stay in Calgary back in 2021. And it was because I felt like the city of Calgary just didn't have as many opportunities that I was familiar with in the major cities of Vancouver or Toronto. I mean, at the end of the day, I just don't want to be the person that lies to you and tell you that the job market is hot and phenomenal, only for you to find out the hard way. But what I did do is find you some data on the internet, and I'll let you decide from there. It was shared by talent.com that the average salary in Calgary came to be roughly $65,000 a year, where the entry position started anywhere around $40K a year, while the most experienced workers made around $133K a year. While Calgary is best known being Canada's energy hub, and some would argue that all they do is focus on oil, gas, and energy, they are at least looking to expand across other industries. In fact, by 2024, Calgary's businesses will spend nearly $7.5 billion on digital transformation, and this includes industries like aerospace, agribusiness, digital media, and technology, just to name a few. It's not perfect by any means, but at least you can appreciate their recognition to diversify in other sectors. Quickly looking at the employment rates out in Alberta, as of October 2023, Alberta sits eye to eye with the national average being at 5.7% and Alberta sitting at 5.8%, while slightly edging Ontario that's sitting at 6.8%. It was good to see how the province has bounced back from its all-time record back in May 2020 during the pandemic, where the employment rate sat at an all-time high within the last 40 years, being at 15.5%. And as you can see, the number has dropped. So I know that many people out in Toronto who have made the move to Calgary or is considering the move to Calgary is doing so to one day raise family out there. And rightfully so, because when real estate in the major city is eating up majority of your bank account or wallet, how do you top this off with now a child? Do you just simply wait for, I don't know, Mr. Beast to give you a home? Now, I'm nowhere close about thinking about having kids as of right now, but I imagine some of you guys are, so I will share with you guys daycare services out in the city right now. It's important to note that the federal government is working with Albertans to reduce fees for parents, and the plan is by 2026, parents will pay an average of $10 per day. But let me remind you that this is a plan. Going through a random daycare services website that I found online, here are the rates, and it looks like it ranges anywhere from $1,000 a month to $1,450 a month. But you know what's cheaper than daycare services altogether? Just drop them off with your parents. Right? I did find online a Reddit story of a couple that looked into daycare services, and although that whole $10-20 a day thing unfortunately isn't the reality yet, according to them, they did knock down their prices by $600, bringing their total roughly to $1,000. But hey, this is reddit.com. Take it for a grain of salt. Let's talk about transportation. And from my experience, I would say getting around Calgary without a car, it's pretty hard. I would say it's even similar to Winnipeg, and that's because the public transportation out in Calgary isn't as frequent or even as convenient as it is living in Toronto. Overall, what I have noticed between the two cities is how residents uses public transportation. For example, out in Toronto, I know many people who only use public transportation throughout their life and never wanting to get their driver's license, or if they do, they get it much later in their life. While I have noticed people in the smaller, non-major cities are almost kind of forced to get their driver's license, because it's either get your driver's license or be forced to use crappy public transportation that comes infrequently. So with that in mind, moving to Calgary, well, you're probably going to end up getting a car to make your way around the city. But the good news is, if you're anything like me and feel like time is money, because the National Household Survey had the average commute in Calgary being 27 minutes, while out in Toronto, the Toronto Star had the average commute being 56 minutes, which, the more I think about it, isn't really apples to apples, just given that I feel like a lot more people in Toronto take public transportation in comparison to Calgary. However, if you're curious what the public transit prices look like out in Calgary, it's $112 monthly for an adult pass, or $3.60 for a day, and that will enable you to ride not only buses but also the two light rail transit line, also known as the C train, that primarily serves the downtown core and the surrounding areas of Calgary. Although I will have to admit, if you're looking for a city where you don't have to buy a car and you just want to simply walk to your favorite restaurant, then I will give Toronto its edge on that. Finally, let's talk about the taxes, and I think it only makes sense that I talk about the tax benefits of living in Alberta, and this would generally mean things like no provincial sales tax, no payroll tax, and no health premiums. And you might be thinking, what does this all mean? Well, just think of it like you're going to your favorite mall, call it Chinook Mall, and you are trying to buy clothing, electronics, and instead of paying 13% that you would normally out in Toronto, where I am, you only pay 5%. That is pretty nice, hey? And just to expand, it's even just the small things of like going to a restaurant, looking at the menu, and seeing your bill being very similar to the price you see on the menu board. Alberta has historically chosen not to implement a provincial sales tax for several reasons. However, it is said that a growing oil industry in Alberta has allowed future governments to avoid sales taxes over the years. Now, whether or not this is sustainable over the next few decades, we'll have to wait and see. So there you guys have it. Those are some of the things to consider financially when making a decision to move over to Calgary. And remember, relocating cities in general is not easy, and that's why I think it's important to look at it beyond a financial standpoint, whether that's climate, family or friends, or just lifestyle in general. So anyhow, with that said, guys, if you found this video insightful, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.